Hey everybody, hope you're having a good day. Positivity, good vibes to everyone. So, the first thing that I want to talk about is Bitcoin because that is typically the first thing that gets everybody into crypto for even beginning to think about anything crypto related. So, what is Bitcoin? What does it do? So, Bitcoin is a open source computer program that basically is the first time that there was digitally scarce money or a commodity. Okay. So Bitcoin is the first example of digital scarcity. And so this means that you can't make more Bitcoin. Each Bitcoin is authenticatable. So you can look at the code for Bitcoin and know that it is true Bitcoin or that it is not true Bitcoin. So this means basically when you spend a US dollar, you can check the security codes, like the embedded security features. There's usually 12 on different high numerical dollar amounts. And so you can check those features. I used to be a bank teller, and then you can tell if the money is real or not. However, because we're human and all those things are replicatable, you can create perfect fake money, right? It's illegal. You're not supposed to do that. It's counterfeiting. But it's possible. It's been done. It happens. And so Bitcoin is the first example of money that is provably scarce. You can authenticate it and you can't spend it twice. So one of the problems with credit cards, checks, money is a double spend. And so Bitcoin was created to solve the double spend problem. The double spend problem is basically there used to be a thing that people could do is called kiting checks, right? You write one check from one account to another account. Then from that one you write another check to another account. And then from that one you write it back to the other account. And so you have three accounts and you're able to inflate the value that is within the accounts because there is a delay in how long that it takes for the funds to transfer from one account to another account. So this used to be something that was done by fraudsters and scam artists. And so what you would do is you would do this in order to inflate the value of your account, pull out all the cash at one time before the cash is actually there, and then you've basically robbed the bank by tricking them into believing there's more value than there was. You can also do this with credit cards and different things. The protections that we have from credit card companies are that if there are any fraudulent payments, then they typically will take care of them and it's not a big deal. But there is a ton of money every year that is lost due to this double spending of the same money. Bitcoin solves this because as soon as the value from one user is transferred to another user, it is considered digital cash, right? So this is person to person transaction. You don't need a bank, you don't need any facilitator in the middle to make this transaction. If I have your Bitcoin wallet address, I can send you Bitcoin and nobody can stop it, right? It's going to take some time to get to you, but once I send it, you can check if I'm sending it, which means that you know that you will receive it. And that is the difference is that whenever you make a wire transfer or something of that nature from one bank to another bank, what you are doing is you are sending information. This bank is telling this bank that has to tell this bank and this bank because depending on how far that you're wiring the money, they have to go through whatever bank is allowed to make that transfer. And so the banks are telling, hey, I owe you this much because this person's sending this much to this person to this, blah, blah, blah. So they are changing information. And eventually it's basically a series of IOUs, and then you get to the other end and it still takes several days before the transaction has been finalized. So with Bitcoin, there is none of that, right? You send the money, you can check if it is sending to you. You know you will receive it, and instead of sending information, you are sending value directly to that other person. So basically, more so, people call Bitcoin digital gold. It's like, I sent you gold for the job or service that you did for me, and you can check that I have the money for the service. You can also check that I sent you the money for the service. So let's say you're almost done with the service. You can check if I've sent it to you. You know that it's sending, and you will receive it at the end of the amount of time it takes for the entire network to approve the transaction. So, on that same topic, what makes Bitcoin special is that there is a transparent ledger. So, banks have internal ledgers, so they know who owes who money, whatever. Bitcoin has a ledger that is open to the public. Everybody can see every transaction that occurs in the chain of transactions. So with that, the ledger is decentralized. This is actually a concept that was come up with by the Medici family. And so the Medici family that had all kinds they basically worked like a bank in their time, in that era. And so they had balance sheets of debts and credits and debits and stuff. And so they basically were one of the primitive, or I guess like first examples of a bank, and they provided that service for a bunch of people. One of the things that made the Medici's method special and better was that they actually had multiple ledgers. Instead of one bookie or one bookkeeper keeping one book, you had tons of bookkeepers keeping a book that had all of the different accounts of all the people. So in order to know that everything was balanced, they could balance different books against each other and know that both were correct. It was essentially a similar thing to how Bitcoin works. Bitcoin has multiple ledgers. Every point of every Bitcoin miner, every person, every individual can download a node which holds the entire ledger of all of the Bitcoin transactions. And so basically, when I send you Bitcoin, that transaction gets all of the ledgers. And the reason it takes so long for a Bitcoin transaction to go fully through is that it has to reach consensus. So it has to agree that I sent you the money, the value was sent from me to you, amongst all of the rest of the nodes, or a majority of the nodes, before it is struck as or hashed into the actual transaction chain. Once the network has reached consensus that a transaction is true, then everywhere on the network it is recorded that that transaction occurred, and everybody knows and agrees that I sent you $100. You have $100 now. So that is what is very special about Bitcoin. So this is one of the first times that this has ever been achieved, sourced in public. So people can look at the code and they can see that it is what it is, and that it's not a different variation or this, that, and the other. So there's ways that you can authenticate it. This is powerful because Bitcoin is essentially a sovereign money. This money's value is based on the value to the network that is being a part of. So we in dollars. Dollars are devalued by the government that prints the money. So this is the inflation talk again. So compared to dollars, there was a point in time several years ago, well, let's say 10 years ago, probably, you could buy hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin for a few dollars, right? And the reason, because value was less, right? The reason the value was less is because there was not a use case. People were not using the network of Bitcoin for anything so much at that time. Eventually, it was being used for actions and stuff later, but over time, the value of one Bitcoin is almost $30,000 right now, a little bit under, right? Because we are currently in our market, but that is because the value of dollar has gotten less. And so if dollars were getting stronger over time, Bitcoin would be worth less over time. But investing in Bitcoin or holding your value in Bitcoin, what you are essentially betting is that governments have printed so much money and that they are addicted to printing money. You are betting that they are not printing money. So as long as governments keep printing money, which they actually can't stop because they've started, they can't just quit because it's all kinds of other reasons. It's a very complicated thing. Basically, it's like inflation and printing money is like a drug. Once you start, you can't stop, because instead of asking us for permission to spend their balance sheet, right? So they add new money to the system in order to be able to do whatever it is that they want to do. Wars are too expensive. If money was finite and based on being solid, then people wouldn't go to war because it doesn't make any sense. But if you have unlimited money, then you can always finance and afford these wars, and you can have a bunch of, and that number can keep going up. You're printing money to cover your debts. You're also printing money and basically loaning yourself expense of the people who are losing purchasing power, right? Bitcoin is meant to solve. This is decentralized money. This is money that is not based on the government, but will always do better in relation to. The only thing that there is to back government dollars is trust. Bitcoin is trustless. You don't need to trust that a government has your best interest in mind in order for it to have value and for you to perceive its value. So people say Bitcoin, magic internet money, it doesn't have any value. Okay, well, dollars have, not backed by gold, right? The only value is that the government, by the force of their army, guarantees that it has value. But if that faith in government were to collapse, then that dollar is a green piece of paper, and you can't eat it. You can't eat Bitcoin either. But when we're talking about apples and oranges, what is valuable? Well, apples or oranges are valuable because you can eat it, right? Dollars and Bitcoin are not any more or less valuable than each other because you can use them both to purchase things that you want, or that you need. And so, are dollars more valuable than Bitcoin? Over time, dollars will always be infinitely less valuable than. For that is that there are only 21 million Bitcoin. It is digitally scarce. There are never going to be more than 21 million Bitcoin. And that's the reason. Something else about Bitcoin is the Bitcoin halving. Automatically programs into the code every 4 years on average. It's actually like a specific block size or a specific number of time. So after a certain amount of transactions has transpired, then there is something called the Bitcoin halving. So what this does is essentially it reduces the amount of supply that can come on to the market. And so you're probably thinking, there's a limited amount of Bitcoin, how not all on the market? So with Bitcoin has to be created, but there is a limit to the amount that can be created. That act of creating Bitcoin is called Bitcoin mining. Bitcoin mining is third parties using computational algorithms, or basically using computers that are doing complex computations in order to verify transactions that are being transacted on the crypto network. And as a result, they are rewarded with Bitcoin, right? And so every halving, which is about every 4 years, the amount of energy that those computations are, the computation difficulty is doubled, but then the reward is cut in half. So this is the halving. This automatically, every 4 years, creates what is going to be a supply shock. Because imagine, Bitcoin has, let's say, it's worth $30,000, right? And that is because now Bitcoin come out onto the market every day, right? So because these come out on the market every day, the value has been agreed upon that it is $30,000. With everybody's supply and demand, right? Everybody buying everything the way that they're buying it, and everything staying the same, assuming it's staying the same, okay? Now, instead of 950 Bitcoin, there is half as much, right? So there's half as much Bitcoin coming out onto the market. The problem is you still have the same demand, right? And so because it is twice as get as much of the Bitcoin, the price will go up because the value of it has gone up because it is more scarce now after the halving than it has been in. It is more difficult for you to get your hands on Bitcoin after the halving than it was before the halving. So supply and demand, automatically price goes up. This is not to say that the price doesn't go down, right? This doesn't mean price goes up in a straight line. That's not how healthy markets work. This is just a process that was put into Bitcoin. I believe that it's going to be like 21 the year that the last Bitcoin comes out onto the market. And then people often say, well, then what's the incentive of the miners to fulfill the transactions or to confirm the transactions, sure that those transactions are true? Because they basically are fitting the security of the network and the transactions to make sure that they are confirmed, right? After there are no longer transaction fees that are associated with every transaction on the Bitcoin network is what is going to pay the miners. And assuming that the price of Bitcoin goes up, right, substantially, in the future, those fees will be substantially bigger than they are now. And so this creates a system where you have the two people, you and me, right? I buy Bitcoin, I pay a fee on the transaction. The fee on the transaction pays the miner that facilitates our transaction, makes sure that our money goes from point A to point B, and then they also secure the network to make sure that nobody else can manipulate the network. The Bitcoin network, in order to be manipulated, you would need over 51% in the network. So this means you have to get everybody in the world to agree that one religion or ideology is correct versus the rest of them, which is why Bitcoin is perceived to be, at least at this point, without quantum computers getting into the whole mess of it, right? And without AI being signally smarter than we are. At this point, Bitcoin is the safest money that exists. And that's the reason. It's because the computational power that it would take in order to manipulate the network is so massive, and the network is so decentralized. You have people that mine Bitcoin from home as a hobby. You have companies that mine Bitcoin in mass, right? And so you are never gonna get people whose whole purpose is to generate money, right? Because they receive rewards. So their income is based on this scarcity of Bitcoin as well as based on the network being used. You're not going to get 51% of those people to agree to create more Bitcoin, because then it makes the value of all of their money that they've received significantly less valuable. Because if you can just print more, then the value is lost. Then we have funny money. Then we have monopoly money. And then we have basically fiat money, which fiat money is money that is backed by the government. And that is essentially the story. That is the thing. I mean, are you going to put your trust in fiat, where you're hoping that the government has your best and heart, or are you going to put your trust in code that is trustless, that is verifiable, that you don't need any third party in order to like help make the transaction? And I know that the miners are a third party, but they can't know who you are. They can't censor your transaction. The computational mining, the work of facilitating the transaction, and then the transaction is sent. So you do need them, so they are a third party, but each third party in this scenario is completely removed from each other. The only way we're connected is that I'm trying to send money, and they make money off making sure that it gets sent. But they cannot censor my transaction versus your transaction the way that a bank or a government may try to. But anyways, so there's my Bitcoin spiel. I hope that was helpful. If there are any questions below, I'm going to try to get deeper on all of these things without getting too deep, because I feel like sometimes with crypto, you can too deep. There is a lot of technical stuff that once you get down to the nitty gritty, it is really complicated, right? Complex stuff, but it distracts from what I think is the actual ethos and the majority of the magic, right? So there is magic here. And so if you're here, you're in the right place. I hope you watched my previous video where I'm talking about some of these crypto influencers. Look, I highly recommend that you build a network. You need a Twitter. And I'm not saying this because Elon Musk or anything else. Twitter is hilarious, as well as being incredibly financially insightful. It also will keep you up to date on all news, rumors of news, which can be just powerful when it comes to trading, and can be just as powerful when making financial decisions. Of course, do your own research. None of this is financial advice, but all of that regular spiel that everybody does. Hope you all are having a good day, and I am excited to run into all of you places, right? After this cycle, 2025 and onwards. And then you'll be ready for the next cycle, and we will all have abundance, right? Not that we don't already, but we'll have more abundance. Have a happy day. Thank you, guys.